How's it going, everyone? Welcome. Olier Gonzalez here. And I just want to explore this chapter, the last from the model or the book, Scope and Closures, just as a way to understand how do I get here, especially why do we have closures, why do we have models, and how that fits into the entire web development or software development. Okay, how this little piece of the puzzle fit into this, right? So to make a quick recap of how do I get here is Kyle Simpson, a software engineer that has previously worked at several companies, right, in Texas over the last 25 years. Oh my God, 20 years. And so he wrote this book. This is the version 2 of this You Don't Know JavaScript Yet, where now he describes this story of how JavaScript reached to this point. So on the first book, he went through first understand who made the language, right? And it's interesting because I don't know exactly the date. And let me take a look at the date here. The JavaScript made by Brendan H. Right? History. Just to know exactly the day when JavaScript was created. May 1995. All right. Dig it. Raise software. Dig it. Okay. Um, what that front? Yeah, there you go. All right. So when this particular language, it was created in 1995. First appearing 4 December 1995. Yeah, but they don't talk or describe adoption by Microsoft. Oh, anyway, exactly. The Netscape Navigator. But I want to know exactly the date. And that's interesting. They don't describe that much here. Reaching maturity. Oh my God. Jesus. Okay. Let me ask. Here is the launch date. I think it'll be launch date. But again, it's only saying in May 1995. That's interesting that they don't describe this only in May. May 1995. And that's interesting. Where are you getting this data, bro? Where are you getting this data? Cyberculture. Give me this data. According to Cyberculture. Okay, in a 2-week flurry in May 1995 by Brandon H., a new hired developer at browser company Netscape, the idea is to extend the web beyond the limits of the HTML. So again, in May 1995, May 1995, but its first appearance was in 4 December 1995. Okay, so why this is important? Just to make this story quickly. is that Brendan H., the software engineer that was hired by Netscape, a browser company that back in that moment they need to design in a particular language to add now certain interactivity to extend the functionality of the HTML. This document base that you can see here that allow us to look all of this document HTML documents in these different windows, right? So as long as you have now a computer that support this browser in any operating system, so you can see this document, and not only that, you can share that document across different computers. So this of course was a revolutionary, something that right now we give that by settle. So imagine that you have to share now a piece of paper, all right, with some information here. How do you do that 30, 40 years before the internet? Most of the time you send that over a fax, all right? Or you use radio to describe is this document. Or you use now a telegraph. So those things that use now Morse code. But now we have this. Again, because this was marketing, it was a marketing shenanigans by that team at Netscape, where the target is Java developers with this new lightweight alternative to write application known as JavaScript. So this now is owned, the legal trademark is owned by right now Oracle through a series of acquisitions that happens along the way. Okay. So because Netscape was acquired by AOL, and then AOL was acquired by Oracle in 2009, and now Oracle holds is the legal trademark. At this point, that is not even enforced, and it is less likely to that happen. But what is happening, or what has happened until this point, is that this toy language, or this scripting language, now has been embedded into this document as a way to extend its functionality. So functionality like, hey, how can I shift from one document to another, or one piece of content to another? Okay, so because now developers over the year and the industry realize the benefit and the profitability of writing this kind of application, or sharing this kind of document and this content across the world, for exchanging, for trading, right, goods and services, which is one of the reasons why I am here. Right now in Argentina, I have to migrate from Venezuela due to the circumstances, geopolitical circumstances. The TLDR is that back in my homeland, despite that Venezuela in the 80s and the 90s, now they were rich, because most of that come from oil export, but they didn't, and I wasn't. I didn't know about how to manage wealth. And this is one of the themes that Washington, Jefferson's, Franklin in the US, Francisco de Paula Santander in Colombia, Simon Bolivar in Venezuela, Louverture Toussaint in Haiti, Zapata in Mexico, Peter first and second from Brazil, O'Higgins in Chile, and San Martin in Argentina, all of them now ask what happened when I liberate myself from so what happened when I have to now be responsible for myself as a country, as a new republic, and so on and so forth, right? which is kind of the same when you go out and leave your parents, right? To do whatever thing that you know you want to do, or you pursue some business or some master degree, yada yada yada. It's like now you are by your own, my friend, and what you're gonna do with that. So it is important for you to know the truth of affairs, true of how you manage yourself, not only the understanding, of yourself, your emotions, that you need also in the truth of the truth of things, in particularly in the physical world. What are the things that are true that needs to be done? Hey, I need to manage my own resource, money, time, food, water, shelter, security, right? And also my own internal things, my emotions, how I respond to that, my relationship with myself and the others, and the nature, my fitness, so on and so forth. So, this is a challenge that is not exclusively for this individual, this is specific people that I mentioned, but also for anyone. And the challenge is for yourself. All right. But again, I mention all of this is because this is the reason why I'm here, and I was exposed to this harsh truth, which is true. Truth doesn't care about your feelings; it is what it is, and then I have to manage and understand the reality of things. And one of those reality is also this language, the origin of JavaScript. And particularly, how do I get here? Especially if I'm going to offer my service to some other peoples out there on the internet that I don't know them, all right? And I just only see them through a camera, through this window. I'm not sure if they are real people, I'm assuming that, but I don't perceive them with my sense. But what is true, what is real, is the exchange. And because in my beginnings, I just do this like some hobby. All right, hey, I'm earning a certain amount of money here by fixing problems of this company and do things and improve their layouts and CSS and HTML and JavaScript. So it all started as a fun little experiment, and then I realized is that, hey, no. If you want to really understand what you're doing, you need to do that in a systematic way. The desire must be there if you truly want to do so. So this is why I'm recording this kind of videos, because I am devoted to understand this. Why is that? Because it cures my problems. It doesn't make my anger or emotions come up anytime that I try to write a particular programs, or to figuring out how the things works, or trying to analyze a long code base and why they do the thing that they do. I just want to understand this, so I now get rid of my problems. I can cure them, so then I can have better problems in terms of fitness, in terms of people, in terms of understanding my mind, so on and so forth. So, but in any case, what is relevant here in this video and in this exploration of the JavaScript is that JavaScript allowed me not only to migrate from my own country to the lack of administration skill, something that Google mentioned as skill issues. Oh my god. Anyway, but due to the lack of administration skill and vision that most of the leaders in Venezuela they don't have. Uh, well, I have to migrate, and then I realized that now this has allowed me to is in a very uh, easy way to move out from conflict areas to more greener pastures, or to pastures that are more open to do business, open to trade, open to the exchange. I wouldn't say free market, but I will say is that they are open to exchange, to the trade, as long as you are good at doing one specific things, in this case the web development, and building products and so on and so forth. As long as you're good at, now, all right, the exchange, the trade can happen. So again, now talking about JavaScript. So as the year progressed from 1995, May 1995 to the 2000s and the 2010s, so as those decades passed, there was a tremendous need not only for a standard, but also is to enhance that standard. So companies, and especially individuals across the web industry, the browser industry, they realize that they need to create some sort of standards. Well, this is when the TC39 kicks in. A bunch of developers across this different web industry that now bi-monthly they get into a room to discuss how these different proposals, or aka champions, are going to make all the way up to the top by passing through a series of a stage until it is accepted as part of a spec. So this is the TC39, and also describing is the stage of that affair. In now, because JavaScript initially was only exclusively to run on the browsers, but as the years go by, you can run in different environments, whether it's a server, light bulbs, and robot. But the only reality that matters for the spec is the web, right? So as the proposals evolve, and some browsers might implement this at their own pace, and I see you, Safari. So this is why we need something called polyfills. It's a way of how you can now add this particular behavior, this code, to be supported by older browsers or browsers that haven't supported that. So this is why polyfills in a particular library called Core GS, all right, is now struggling and is maintained by a Russian developer. And I think why he's so devoted to this, because again, he is earning a decent amount of money in their circumstance, which is in Russia, and Russia is not friendly to. I'm talking from what I see from the outside world, all right? And Russia is not known for its business deals and growth and prosper. Russia, it is known as somebody that is a taker, right? Don't get me wrong, the US as well, but it will give you now is, as long as you follow that, their principles, the business principle, yeah, you might now enter into this domain and compete and be the first. But in Russia, no. It's more like foreign capitalists. It's like, stay you there where you are, and don't try to improve or get to be the number one. If you want to, now you know the consequence of that. But in any case, So the U.S. is more open to this kind of business and to be the number one in whatever you do, to be the ultimate. So what I mentioned is the developers of Core, yes, actually, not because I live in Russia. So this is what I perceive, and something that is heavily used for a lot of companies that now they just want to not rely on any frameworks, just on pure native web technology, particularly the GS. And now here, well, this provides some of these new behaviors that the spec mentioned, but browser hasn't implemented yet. And you don't know when, but at some point they will. So another common theme is that because in JavaScript it allows to build our applications in different paradigms: procedural, functional, and object-oriented programming. We need to understand how this actually works, how this machine, how the language works. And it turns out that, well, this machines, unlike compiled languages, right? It is behave more like it is an scripted language, aka in theory, this set of instructions will be analyzed one after another. But what happened is that this behave more like a compiled language when it comes to analyze code, not to generate that. So, because now any scripting language that you see out there is or has been saw by the industry and the college as a slow languages, right? Because, well, you need to go one after the another, each of a statement, and if you find along the way an error, your program will crash. So this scripting language, the community asks if the language in itself is fast enough to run, for example, heavy applications like games. So ASM was the first attempt back in 2013 by a bunch of Mozilla developers to see if JavaScript is a fast enough language by creating now a subset of JavaScript, aka a language written in JavaScript, but specifically target the engine for further optimizations. So it turns out that when they did that, when they pour an Unreal game engine written in C++ to this ASM, they were successfully to run that on the browser. Again, this language was not meant to be authored by any JavaScript developers, but it showed that JavaScript, in fact, is a powerful and fast language. So years by, and then we have now this WebAssembly, where this is the spiritual successor, and say instead of having a parsing phase, all right, let's going to skip that and create a language that looks like assembly language, where the only thing that we care is that when this piece of code will be run. So now has become this universal compiler target, because whatever program that you have in C++, Rust, Python, you name it, right? Now they can be poured into this, or they can be transformed into this WebAssembly and run in these environments. So that is huge. And JavaScript was not, and WebAssembly was not meant to be replace JavaScript. It was just to, it is a different segue from JavaScript, completely. So now, because JavaScript at the beginning has all of these different nuances and stuff, because it was a language written in a week, and then over the years has been iterated through a series of new proposals by the TC39. So because we have inherited a lot of the design, and some of them some problems that we find when we're writing applications. So now the strict mode is this, a change in the semantics of how the code is evaluated, and something that JavaScript developer has used as a way to have a better chance for JavaScript engines for optimizing and running our code. So all of this is just the quick review of JavaScript in itself. But when it comes to now understand is the technical aspect of how you write your programs and so on and so forth. So first I look at, well, how now JavaScript run this application, what is a program in JavaScript, and how now different programs cooperate in JavaScript. Also, how you can write your programs, what is a program in itself, which allow you to declare statements and the whole values. What are the possible values in JavaScript? So primitive and objects, and what this object means, and what are the different type of objects that we can have as an array or a hash map or a function, and what a function is, how the functions behave in explore also is what is this values, what is the operation of these values. So for example, is how you compare values, of different types or with the same types, known as equality comparison, or how you transform one value to another value, type coercion. And then explore how you can organize your programs. For example, using functions or immediately invoke function expressions, IIFE, or class and models. So as I mentioned here, I just explained now how we're starting from understand the social aspect of JavaScript and then the more technical one, and what are now the things that as we develop and creating in JavaScript. So what are the truth of writing this kind of application, of writing is this programs, and how you can now find ways to make that easy. So and then when you explore now the low-level features of the JavaScript, particularly is that how now we solve common problems, for example, like iterations, and how we have now the iterator approach and the iteration, the iterator design patterns, how that works, the iterator and the iterable interface, so the iterator protocol and the iterable. What is now a function or a closure, right? Or again, looking at the anatomy of one of these values, object values, all right? So for example is the arrays, the anatomy of the arrays. What are the common things that you do in this kind of arrays, in these collections, all right? And then the anatomy of the functions, all right? Which is, hey, what is the value of this, and what the this represent, what you can have access to the this in a function. And the other is a closure. What is a closure? What does it mean, and when can we use now a closure, and why a closure exists in the first place? And the other type of value, object type of value, by looking at its anatomy, is the object in itself. So, for example, is that what an object is, what it represents, what allows us to do, And what is this thing called as the prototype change? When allow you to now is delegate the property access of among different objects, so you can reuse their functionality with this piece of information in this bundle, in these objects. So I do think that's very, very revealing, interesting in terms of describing that story of how do I get here. In particular, is focuses on a mechanism that is built in JavaScript known as the scope, and the scope chains and the closure. So first is by exploring is what a closure is. Why it is important to know how to work with variables, and these kind of variables, how they behave in different scenarios. Okay, so because working with variables is one of the most understanding how working with variables is one of the fundamental skills that you need to know when you're writing your programs, because those scopes that can be used when you use a block or a functions. So because now functions are values in JavaScript, and you can define now variables inside of those functions. The scope structure is determined before the code is executed. So don't take my word for granted. This is based on the observable behavior, for example, of how JavaScript now detects syntax errors and some early errors, and the other is that hoisting. Okay, so how now JavaScript is somehow figuring out what is the value of this variables in a particular scope known as hoisting. So all of these themes that I mentioned are specific to, so what happens is before the code is executed. So because of that, now JavaScript, as I mentioned before, behaves much like a compiled language when analyze the code rather than as an interpreted. It works more like a compiled language when it analyzes the code, not when it generates that. Okay. So I also look at the lexical scope, or the classical theory, compiler theory, where you have now three phases. All right. So first is the tokenizing or lexical. It's going to take all of these specific characters, right, and convert that into meaningful tokens for the language. So it's like when you're reading English or Spanish, anytime that you see these strings of characters, they're going to make sense in your language. When you're starting to read this in Chinese, it doesn't make sense for you. First, because you don't understand the language. But when you do, you say, oh my God, it's like you unlock a new power. How do you say that in games? Something like that. Challenge unlock, something like that, right? So challenge unlock, something like that. And yeah, challenge unlock. Is this one? Challenge unlock in GTA 5. Yeah, I'm taking a quick segue here. I do know that I'm taking a quick segue here. So in any case, yes, a challenge unlock. So this is now the parsing. This is the relaxing or the tokenizer phase. So now that you have all of these different tokens like in a bucket, all right, with all of this, right, it turns out that now we need to understand the semantics of this, how the things is related to each other for this language. And this is known as the parsing phase. So in this phase is when a abstract syntax tree, which is a way of how you now see the relationship of all of these different tokens here, right? How they relate each other, and they create now this particular structure here. Once you have that, usually compiled language now generate code into that specific platform. So whether it is on Windows or Mac or any of these Linux, right? It generates this portable binary code. But in the case of JavaScript, it doesn't generate that. So the difference between a compiled and interpreted language is that a compiled language is generate a portable binary code, where now the interpreted is generating the interpreted, the code is the same in that form, right? It doesn't generate something. So it's an engine that take that strings of code and generate is the code for you, right? So this is the difference between one and another. So as I mentioned, the observable behavior in JavaScript is to behave like a compiled language when it analyzes the code, not when it not how it generate code. So when you use this specific scope, the block, the functions, right? Each one of them behave in a particular way, and all of this scope now, when you use them, they internally has a reference to the outer scope. This is known as the scope change, which allows you to now access two variables or identifiers in outer scopes, right? So anytime that you, for example, use the same identifier in different scopes, what you're doing is shadowing, aka you are not able to lexically access to all of this, or to access to an identifier with the same name in different scope, right? So this scope change is something that Kyle Simpson mentioned, that a good metaphor to understand this is a conversation that is that have between the engine, first with the compile phase and then on the execution. So first is the scope manager. It's a conversation that the scope manager has with the engines to rise all of this identifier and put it into a bucket, right? So when now the JavaScript engines know that, and the or the scope manager, the thing here is that it's a conversation between the compiler and the engine, which is the one who is going to execute the code, right, with the scope manager. So when it compiles, when it analyzes the code, this analyzer, the compiler, is having a conversation with the scope manager, where it's going to now identify all of this name of the variables or identifiers and create a list internally, right? A record of all of this, right? And is going to now throw some specific error if something doesn't go according to its rule. Once that is done, then the engine is now having a conversation with, say, hey, I will need to assign this value. I need to execute these statements. Do we have these identifiers? And so on and so forth. This is the metaphor that Kyle Simpson used in this to think about this. And the other is with the scope chain, which is like, think of this like a building when you go out to look up a particular person in a building until you find it or not. So this is now how the scope change in real life actually works. So the different scope that you can have in writing your application is, hey, well, initially with the block scope, how the things behave, all right? The other is the function scope, the parameter scope, which is quite unknown, in how this scope, specifically how you can now write your applications in a way that is much more that makes much more sense and is meaningful and is improve the readability of your code when using now functions in scope. So for example is avoid using arrow functions because first they are not lexically available, and if you need that, so you might have that. And the other is name your functions or use a name descriptor so to be explicit about the intent of this function. So that's fine. And the other is the other way of how can we now write or scope is using now immediately invoke function expression as a way to say, hey, I want to now run these functions immediately, and then whatever value you generate, now hold that into a variable or a container. So, so. The other scope is the global scope. And this global scope now is specific to the environment that you run. But at the end of the day, the reason why we have a scope is we have now a place where we can share this piece of information. So when we define variables that hold values, which is variables at the end of the day is now are containers, it allows us to is share this piece of information in different scopes, nested different scope. That's the reason why we have now a scope. Okay, so hey, this is now the common ground, the playground where we can now is share here and play and do things here, right? Anything outside that doesn't exist in the from the program wise. Anything outside of that program wise doesn't care. So that's great. That's interesting, you know, because as I progress in my understanding of the different environments we can run JavaScript, and we can have global scope. In the browser we have the window, and sort of the nuances when you define variables inside of that with the function and the var keywords which attach to the global object, but not with the let and cons. And also you can now cherry pick elements via the window objects using the square brackets, as long as that element in the DOM has an ID. The other environment is the service worker. Here we use the self, we access to the global scope via the self. Functions and var behave the same. Function var and let and cons behave the same as in the window objects. Service workers are great when you want to now defer some computations or workloads without blocking the main thread, which is the UI. I also look at the models that, despite that they don't have any global scope, you can think of this like a function injecting specific parameters to this scope that make them accessible. And The other is the how do you call it? The um, the model, as I mentioned, the model and the common GS. All right, and the other is the node environments, where each one of those programs that it runs, they are their own models. Traditionally, you don't have access to, using CommonJS, you don't have access to the global variables. You can think of this like injecting those global properties or those global variables like a function here. So you have now a function, especially when you use now CommonJS. You can think of this like a function that you pass no certain arguments, certain parameters that allow you to now access to these internal properties. So, for example, in the case of Node with CommonJS, hey, I do want to have, I do need is the process. Anything related to the process. I need to read a file, or I need to look up for a HTTP connection or network request, and so on and so forth. I need to have access to the crypto because I want to generate some unique IDs and so on and so forth. But this is how now the CommonJS works, right? And in the case of the ESM, now is quite similar, but again, by default, each one of your files in nodes, they are their own models. They don't have global objects, but you can have access via this global object that is now a record that is maintained by node, this environment, via the global specific API or the global variable. So after I mention all of these different scopes, and then how now the functions var, let, and cons behave across different scope, particularly the var, the function, and var, how now they are is a function scope or global scope, and the hosting behaviors, unlike let and cons, they are not hosted. They are not hosted, and they are. So the reason why they exist is because having identifiers with the or having identifiers and really clear the variables, having identifiers with the same name in the same scope can be some problematic. First, when it comes to debugging, and the other is when you assign now a value to something, right? So when you, for example, modify is the value of an identifier, a variable, from a boolean, and then this is now in a string, and then when you do that kind of stuff, it is quite hard to spot on. So let and comes here and say, hey, I'll be now scope by block, all right? Let won't be hosted on, and same for cons, but with cons, I just want is to define this identifier and fix that value. So you can modify that value down the line. And with let, is say, hey, if you want to have access to this identifier, you can define them first and then assign a value when you see fit that. Again, most of the time, the problems not lies in when you assign a value, is when you mutate a value, when you now allow this to happen. And this is why the functional programming kicks in with functional lights and so on and so forth, to say, hey, you know what? Instead of, so when it comes to managing applications, maintaining and so on and so forth, it is much more feasible to always generate a new state of that computation, right? uh, rather than mutate the value in itself. This goes beyond of today's topic, I know, but it's at least quite interesting for those who wants to dive deep into this, uh, how these things will work. So, with the scope, uh, when when I look at how these variables behave here, and also now how variables var function let in cons behave in looping structures. For example, is on while and do while, so they behave as expected, and also is with the var and functions in while and for in for off. But when it comes to for looping syntax, so now let is going to create is a new instance of that variable on each iteration. So it holds now a reference. It creates now a new reference of this. Whereas when you use now with var, it's going to maintain the same reference here. It's not creating is a new reference. In fact, it's updating that same reference. In the case of cons, of course, it doesn't allow you to modify or create a new cons with the same identifier. So it turns out that this is quite interesting. I also look at something known as a temporal dead zone, which doesn't allow you to access to a variable that you define, access to an identifier without defining them first. Especially this is true for let and also for var and functions. This is not a matter of exclusivity for let. This is also is for var and function. So as I describe that, and also now how it works with the if statement, okay, and how it's important for us to avoid defining functions definitions instead of if a statement, because becomes quite hard to debug. So here you say, hey, let me use now a variables to hold that functionality, check if that functionality doesn't exist, and if it doesn't exist, now update that function, update that reference with this new value, right? But again, all of this is just how now the function var, let, and cons behave in looping syntax and the scope syntax, right? So after I look at that, and when it comes to now understand how to write our programs, part of the maturity and of on any industry, and in our case when writing our application, is to look at how can we organize our code in a way that it makes much more sense and it is easy for us to maintain and secure as well. So this is when you are writing applications, you're starting to face some particular issues when it comes to code organization and security. So for example, is you're starting to now deal with name collisions, okay, or unintended dependencies that you expose in a particular scope, or unintended behaviors. These last two are solved via TypeScript, but the first one does not. So how can we now solve this? So first is using immediately invoke function expressions that hold that computation and then expose these variables that we need and hold them into a single identifier. This might sound very abstract in the sense, again, I'm not going to go into the details. You can take a look at the books for doing so. because what I want to do is into the video is to describe it in a high level sense. This yeah, from a high level, I want to describe is this story of how we need to organize, or how I'm here looking at the model patterns. So this way of organizing our code in immediately invoke function expression, which was the first way of how can we now modularize our applications, and using now is var and function and let in cons. The other thinking, or the other abstract level, or the other another abstraction layer is, well, now how can we now write our applications with functions and understand how the closure fits in? Because closure is part of the anatomy of the function, and a function is a scope, a type of a scope, right? So closures allow us to keep track or remember functions that remember variables or values that live outside of the function, even after this function is executed in a different place in our program, when those variables were defined. Why this is useful, you might wonder, which is the same question that I had. So anytime that you need to keep track some piece of information in your application, closures allow you to do so. So for example, is a counter, or when you want to hold some reference of a particular function and attach that to an event listener, right? So I look at the observable behavior of the closure. So how you define this, and you need to first define a function that has reference that referencing variables in the outside scope, right? You must instantiate that function, in that instance, or that function call must be in a different scope change from where the variable was defined. So this is actually effectively creating is a closure. And because you are now holding is a live link, you need to somehow get rid of that to let now the garbage collector to do its job, right? So anytime that you now, for example, leave some reference, or any identifier with some unknown reference, or when you set an identifier with undefined or null, so they don't have any values there, you're making then a candidate to be now swept out by the garbage collector, right? So that's that's interesting, you know. I also look at how to do that, and what's the relevant and what's important here with the scope, especially with closure, is that this allow us is to organize is piece of information that we need to reuse in different part of our programs, while keep tracking of those variables and updating that variables. So the thing here is that with closure, what it enables is this way to organize data, and it is functionality in a bundle that we can now share in different part of our programs, right? And have a live link to those data. So we can update that data, or even delete that, or create a new one when we see fit. So this particularly way of organizing code, which is what I'm going to discuss here, right, is the most important organization patterns in all programming, the model. As we'll see, models are inherently built from what we already cover. The payoff for your effort in learning lexical scope and closures. So we have examined every angle of lexical scope, the ins and outs, right? From the breadth of the global scope down through nested block scope into the intricacies of the variable's life cycle. Then we leverage lexical scope to understand the full power of closures. But again, this is why I'm looking at this, right? Of every angle of the lexical scope, the ins and outs of this. So from the breadth of global scope down through nested block scope into the intricacies of variables life cycle. So then we leverage the lexical scope to understand the power exactly. Then we leverage the lexical scope to understand the full power of closure. And take a moment to reflect how far you have come in this journey so far, and you have taken big step in getting to know JavaScript more deeply. The central theme in this book has been that understanding and mastering scope and closure is key in properly restructuring and organizing our code, especially the decision on where to store information in variables. I think I read that too fast, but it's this. So the central thing of this book has been that understanding and mastering scope and closure is the key okay, exactly. So understanding and mastering is the scope and closure is key to properly structuring our program, proper structuring and organizing our program here, especially how these variables or where to store information in variables. Our goal in this final chapter is to appreciate how models embody the importance of this topic. So the relevancy of where to store information in variables and its functionality, elevating them from abstract concept to concrete practical improvement in building programs. So the deal there is that. So I am leveraging now is, yeah, that's right. So I'm leveraging now, yes. So I am leveraging now. So the whole point of this book, right, is that by examining is the lexical ins and outs from the breadth of the global scope to down to the narrow of block scope, and how the variables behave or the life cycle of variables. So we use that to leverage now the understanding, to understand the full power of closure, and how now closures, and now understanding is the scope and closures are key to structuring our programs, to structuring and organizing our code, especially the where to put the information, or where to put, or when to store information. Where to store information in variables. Okay. So now we're going to see how that fit in building programs with the models here. So the encapsulation and least exposure. So encapsulation is often cited as a principle of OP programming, but it's more fundamental and broadly applicable than that. The goal of encapsulation is the bundling or co-location of information, data, and behavior, which is a function, that together serve a common purpose. That's the whole point of this encapsulation. And there's a very interesting interview with the creator of the UML diagram. Um, Jesus fucking Christ. Holy moly. Grady Butch, right? I can leave that. I'll leave that. Grady Butch, right? Well, the Grady Butch network. Oh my God, did they? Grady Butch network. If they tell you, right? Grady Butch network is estimated at 5 million as 2025. This figure reflects his significant contribution to software engineering, particularly through the development of the Bush method and his co-creation of the unified model language. Who's telling this? Holy hell, he has 70 years old. Oh my God. Education, U.S. Air Force Academy. Known as the Bush method here. He lived in Hawaii. Bush developed the Bush method of software development, which he presented in his 1994 book, Object-Oriented Analysis and Design with Application. The method was authored by Bush when he was working at Rational Software, acquired by IBM. Okay. IBM see value in this S, and they say, hey, you know what? No, let me acquire you before you compete with us. Okay. Published in 1992 and revised in 1994. The method is composed of an object-oriented modeling language and iterative object-oriented development process. Exactly, an iterative object-oriented development process, and a set of recommended practice. The recommended practice include adding more classes to simplify complex code. The methodology was widely used in software engineering for object-oriented analysis and design, and benefits from ample documentation and support tools. The Bush notation is characterized by cloud shapes to represent classes and distinguish the following diagrams. Okay, logical and physical, static and dynamic, class diagram and object diagrams, dynamic state transition diagram, and interactions diagram. And then you have the physical and static, which is the model diagram and process diagram. The process is organized around a macro and micro processes. The macro processes identify the following activity cycles: conceptualization, establish core requirement, analysis, develop a model of the desired behavior, design, create an architecture. Okay, evolution for the implementation, and maintaining for the evolution after the delivery. The microprocess is applied to new classes, structures, or behaviors that emerge during the macro processes. It is made of the following cycle: identification of classes and objects, identification of their semantics, identification of their relationship, specification of their interface, and implementation. The notation aspect of the Bush method has now been superseded by the unified modeling language, which features graphical elements from the Bush method along with elements from the object modeling technique. And object-oriented software engineering. The methodological aspect of the Bush method has been incorporated into several methodologies and processes. The primary such methodology being the rational unified process. The design patterns. Bush is also an advocate of the design pattern. For instance, he wrote the foreword to Design Pattern, an early and highly influential book in the book. Is this same? Okay. IBM Research Almadine. He now is part of the IBM Research Almadine, serving as a chief scientist for chief scientist for software engineering, where he continued his work on the Handbook of Software Architecture, and also leads several long-term projects in software engineering. Grady has served as an architect and architectural mentor for numerous complex software intense systems around the world. And the publication here, software engineer with ADA. Oh, okay, holy moly. Object Solutions, managing the Object project, the unified software development process with Ivar Jacobson, a Swedish computer scientist and a software engineer. Computer scientist and software engineer. That's the hardware and the software. Known as the major contributor to UML. And James Rubin, computer science and object-oriented methodologies. Okay. The complete UML training course, the Unified Modeling Language Reference Manual, and the Unified Modeling Language User Guide. Object-oriented analysis and design with application. In 1995, Bush was inducted as a fellow of the Association for Computing Machinery. He was named an IBM fellow in 2003, soon after his entry into IBM, and assumed his current role on March 2018. In March 18, 2008, he was recognized as the IEEE Fellow in 2010. In 2012, Bush was awarded the Lovelace Medal for 2012 by the British Computer Society, and gave the 2013 Lovelace Lecture, Trends in Programming. He gave the Turing Lecture in 2007. What is a Turing Lecture? What the French do is this? He was awarded the IEEE Computer Society Computer Pioneer Award in 2016, and for his pioneering work in object modeling, and that led to the creation of the Unified Modeling Language. United States Air Force Academy. Holy hell, bro. I mean, this is this we're not established in April 1, 1954. Integrity first, service before self. Excellent in all we do. The Air Force. Okay. You know what? This is not some boot camps, bro. You know what I mean? Let me see if I can. Anyway. So the vision of yes, this is not some sort of boot camp when they say, hey, no, I'm going to make these kind of courses to put you out there in the market. No. The vision of the Air Force. Oh my God. The vision of the Air Force, holy hell. This is what, Nevada? Colorado Springs. No. What, Ohio? Denver? What the fuck is this? Colorado. Oh my God. Holy shit, nigga. Colorado, Denver. Holy shit. Nigga. What the French dudes? That is mind-bending, bro. That is mind-bending shit. Holy fuck, that's a lot. Oh my God. This is one of the things that I love about the internet. This is one of the things that I love of the internet. In artists, like, holy hell, artists like British artists, British, British, British artists in the 70s. It's because I don't have the name on. David Bowie. Okay, let's say David Bowie, right? Something that David Bowie, all right, mentioned. The Beatles and Brian Epstein. John Lennon. hmm British pop music manager. hmm Evacuated from London to escape V1 flying bombs. hmm Holy hell, he's still alive? Main man. Oh my god. The fuck? Jesus fucking Christ. Do you know what is main man? Do you know what is main man? Is one of the largest. Is the first largest hedge fund in UK, bro. No. UK main man UK hedge fund. Okay, hedge fund. You know, hedge fund. MAM group. Everything is related, man. Everything is related. Oh my god. Everything is related. Holy hell. Oh man. So what? So I think that eventually he's part of that. Bowie in 1970, and when Mercury contract was terminated in 1971, De Fry was free to sign a record deal with RCA. In 1971, De Fry has decided that breaking Bowie in the US will require a permanent corporate presence and suggests to Myers. De Fry has decided that breaking Bowie in the US will require. Holy hell. De Fry has decided that breaking Bowie in the US will require a permanent corporate presence and suggests to Myers that they open office in New York. By the time Jim had established a significant position in the UK industry, and Myers was uncomfortable about risking the base in the new US venture. As a result, the Fries and Mayer discussion a division of the varying talent GM represent and reach a settlement which will allow the Fries to keep certain artists while the rest remain with Jen. They sign an agreement where Jeffrey will take Bowie, Iggy Pop, Mott the Hoople, and Dana Gillespie and Mike Ronson in return for a financial settlement. Main group and companies. The Fry formed the Main Man Group of companies in 1972. Holy hell. It's an investment management business. And I get it, and I get it why these persons that they are not in the front line. They are like the tyrant. Oh my god. They are like the tyrant Lannister, right? They are like the Tyrion Lannister, bitch. um, they are like the Tyrion Lannister, as it is, a dwarf with a mentality, right? They are like that, like Tyrion Lannister. Exactly. They are like, why I mentioned Tyrion Lannister. This is interesting. Technology and music and investments and art and stories actually has a lot of income. So because you are not the front, you because agents, music agents, they are not the front line. They're not they're not in the front of the public, right? Um, they see themselves as somebody that is managers. That's why the role of manager, the hand of a king, the one who's behind the throne, the managers here. And the manager, of course, see the truth of of all of this, which is, hey, do we need to make sure that whatever we're earning, we need to manage that for ourselves first. Uh, and this is a nice thing that they recognize is the true nature of how humans behave and how humans they interact here, right? Um, which is this is an exchange, bro. In anything, this is an exchange. Artists sin, all right, uh, and they are now exchanging with the public, with their audience, something that the audience deems that this is valuable, right? And they are willing to pay huge amount of money to be there. No one's decide that. It's up to the audience, the masses, that they say, hey, they are worthwhile to paying for. Because I am not. Because if I sing in this way, if I do that, I am not. Holy moly, bro. And I'm going to explain why I took this segue, right, in a moment. But again, it's this. So man group. So the Fry formed the man group of companies in 1972 with offices in New York, London, and Tokyo. This company had a management structure that combined ingredients of the movie studio with those of the independent producers, record labels, music publisher, and management. The original main man team was made up of members from Andy Warhol, artists and filmmakers. Andy Warhol. Oh my god. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Holy hell. Andy Warhol. A toddler Warhol. Right with his mom. Right with his mom. And Julie and his brother. Holy hell, she looked like his mom. Okay. Okay. Um. Hmm. Okay. After graduating from the Carnegie Institute of Technology in June 1949, Wormhole moved to New York City with his classmate Philip Bernstein. They lived in a six-floor walk-up tenant building on St. Mark Place, near Tompkinson Square Park in East Village. On his second day in New York, Warhol visited Bernice. Okay, I'm getting too long. um, Warhol. Mm-hmm. So Warhol was more like a in June 3, 1968, radical feminist writer Valeria Solanas shot. Um, hmm, hmm. known for her attempts to murder the artist. I, a man. The Scum Manifesto. Misandry's Manifesto by Valera Solanas, an American radical feminist, and attempt murder. Published in 1967, it argues that men have ruined the world and that it's up to the woman to fix it. Okay, here we go, bro. And it's interesting because it's not about men or women, it's about the mind, bro. That's the thing that we share across humanity. It's the mind, it's this entity here. Criminal charge: attempted murder, illegal possession of a gun, bleached to reckless assault with intent to harm, and 3 years in prison. She have a child? Oh my god. Anyway, this prop trunk using Andy Warhol's Silver Factory is where the copy of the Up Your Ass script Solanas gave Warhol was eventually found after Warhol's death in 1987. The Scum Manifesto. And shooting an attempt. Okay. She authored the Scum Manifesto, a separate feminist tract that advocated the elimination of men, and appeared in the Warhol film. Mayer received only minor injuries and was released from the hospital later the same day. Warhol was seriously wounded by the attack and barely survived. He remained in the hospital for nearly 2 months. Solanas turned herself into the police a few hours after the attack and said that Warhol had too much control over my life. What? Okay. She was subsequently diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. This is the schizophrenia and paranoid is because there is some. Again, this is something that Carl Jung described, right? The schizophrenia and the paranoid is because there is there is something wrong within self that it observe and it perceive in the outside world that is not able to understand. It doesn't want to understand. And this produces, of course, this distortion or this illness of not being able to be even functional for herself or for himself in the world, and it is up to that patient to figuring out that for himself, because nobody else is gonna do that. Nobody else is gonna do that, man. Anyway, but yeah, Jess Johnson, an assistant who was present at the factory during the shooting, visited Warhol daily at the hospital, and the two developed an intimate relationship. Shortly after Warhol was discharged, Johnson moved in with him to aid his recovery and help care for Warhol's ailing mother. During Warhol's hospitalization that summer, Paul Morrissey assumed primary filmmaking responsibilities and directing his film Flesh. Starring Joey de la Senza. Like what? Like erotic? Something like that? Exactly. Joe earns money by selling sex to both men and women, moving through a series of encounters that reveal the transactional and emotional detachment of his life. He lives with his girlfriend, Geraldine Smith, who is pregnant and emotionally unstable. While Joe spends the day seeking clients to raise money for an abortion, Geddes remained at home, interacting with friends and drifting between anxiety, boredom, and resentment. Um, okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Um. All right. Post-shooting in August 1968, Warhol made an appearance in the court after Philip "Fufu" Van Scoy Smith, an investor in a cancelled film adaptation of the Charlotte Bronte novel Jane Eyre, sued him 83K. A legal battle ensued for 2 years, ending after the back failed to show up in court. Warhol re-emerged on the public social scene that fall. In September 1968, he and Ultraviolet attend a party celebrating the competition of the film Midnight Cowboy. The film includes a party scene featuring members of the factory that was shot during Warhol's hospitalization. In February 1969, Warhol and his entourage traveled to LA to discuss a prospective movie deal with Columbia Pictures. Warhol, who have always had interest in photography, used a Polaroid camera to document his recuperation after the shooting. A few in his photographs were published in May 1969 edition of Square. He will become well known for always carrying his Polaroid camera to chronicle his encounter. Okay. Okay. Exactly. He was more like homosexual interests. Compared to the success and the scandal of Warhol work in 1960 and the early 70s were much quieter years. He became more entrepreneurial. He was generally regarded as quiet, shy, and meticulous observer. Art critic Robert Hughes called him the white mole of the Union Square. Mole? What the hell is mole? Is what I think it is? Mole. The white mole. The white mole. What the hell is this? Oh, okay, exactly, it's a topo. The white mole. Oh, okay. Okay, the white mole. All right. Exactly. The white mole of Union Square. His fashion evolved from what Warhol called his leather look to his Brooks Brothers look, which include a Brooks Brothers shirt and tie, and Levi jeans. As Warhol continued to fall into filmmaking, he has established himself as one of the most celebrated and well-known pop art figures to emerge from the 60s. The Pasadena Arts. In Pasadena, organized a major retrospective in his work in 1970. The show traveled to the museum. Alright. Warhol is credited with both the cover concept and photography of Rolling Stone and Sticky Fingers. He received that. Warhol planned to Warhol and his life-in boyfriend Jet Johnson got a Dachshund puppy, Archie. In November 1972, the Warhol doted on Archie and took him everywhere, to the studio, parties, restaurants, and trip to Europe. He created a portrait of Johnson, Archie, and Amos. A second Dachshund they got a few years later. Warhol began traveling to Europe more frequently and developed fondness from Paris. Fondness. A quality proceeding from feeling of affection, of love. Fondness. Well, back in Paris, man, in the 70s, because now Paris is completely different in 2000. 15 years later. Holy hell. Warhol's work was included in inaugural show and Warhol and Johnson moved into New Georgian townhouse. Okay, in the opening of the Studio 54 in 1977, ushering in the new era in New York City nightlife. Warhol would often socialize at Studio 54 and take note of the drug-fueled activity that his friend engaged in at parties. In 1977, Warhol began taking nude photographs of men in various poses and performing sexual acts, refers to as landscape, for what became known as the torso and sex parties. Dirty art, Andy Warhol. Dirty art. It is there is, well, anyway, there is no dirty or clean art. Anyway, most of the men were street hustlers and male prostitutes brought to the factory by Halston's lovers, Victor Hugo. What the hell? It was a Venezuelan born American artist. What? What oh my god, I get into this. Jesus fucking Christ. I get into this rabbit hole. I'm a Venezuelan. That's what I get into this. Victor Hugo, born Victor Rojas, was a Venezuelan-born American artist and window dresser. Holy hell! Best known as partner of the fashion design Halston. Early life. Hugo was born at the time of a military coup d'etat in Caracas, 1948. He immigrated with his mother to New York City in the early 70s. Relationship with Halston and friendship with Warhol. Hugo first encountered Halston while working as an escort to make ends meet in 1972. Upon their relationship progressing from transactional to romantic, Hugo began doing display for Halston Madison Avenue store. He said to have been the first window dresser to have incorporated pop art into his design. In keeping his energetic persona, Hugo was quoted in the Interview magazine. Perhaps you will describe me as a jade, darling, but I prefer to say that in living there is absolutely nothing that is bad. I can only say that I live fully 24 hours a day and I regret nothing. Hugo was also Haltor's art advisor. Hugo was selling Warhol artwork to Halston, which benefited Halston as well as because it allowed Victor to earn money through commissions without stretching the payroll of Halston's enterprise. Hugo later became one of the Andy Warhol's assistants at the factory, where among other things he worked on the painter oxidation paintings. In 1977, Warhol photographed Hugo nude and performing sexual acts from his daughter and sex party. When Studio 54 opened in 1977, Halton and Hugo immersed themselves in hedonistic and partying lifestyles. Cocaine-infused orgies were held at Halston Upper East Side townhouse. Warhol noted in 1977 diary entry that Hugo had a girlfriend named Nancy who he slept with. What? Had a girlfriend named Nancy who he had slept with, for cocaine. Holy hell. Okay. Oh my god. In his memoir, Bob Colasello, American writer, former executive director at the Warhol interview, described how Warhol often used Hugo to antagonize Halston. Andy loved it when Victor showed up at Studio 54 in a jockstrap or at a Halston party in a Halston dress. In both cases, much of the Halston's embarrassment. Victor later told me that Andy actually paid him to do this thing. He further stated that Andy saw Victor as the perfect source for ideas. Victor? Who the fuck is Victor? Someone with a fertile imagination who didn't know what to do with it. The Venezuelan-owned art was going nowhere. Exactly. The Venezuelan-owned art was going nowhere. He signed rat traps and handed them out of the party. He dipped chicken feet in red paint and called their footprints drawing. In 1978, the artist and the videographer Anton Perish made a short film of Hugo destroying a Warhol painting as a sacrifice. Hugo's friendship with Warhol caused a rift in Warhol's relationship with his longtime boyfriend Jet Jensen. Hugo's friendship with Warhol caused a rift in Warhol's relationship with his longtime boyfriend. When Studio 54 opened, the New York was at the height of its decadence. And things changed with Andy. Johnson told Warhol biographer Victor Brockis, "I never liked that it seems, and I felt that Andy was just wasting his time. I was really upsetting. He spent his time with the most ridiculous people." His intermittent relationship with Halston dissipated after more than a decade. His intermittent relationship with Halston dissipated after more than a decade. Hugo ever increased drug addiction and tempestuous nature was a contributing factor to the couple breakup. By 1988, Halston had been diagnosed with HVI and relocated soon after to San Francisco to be closer to his family. Despite the relationship having ended, Halston still continued to pay for Hugo's housing and other expenses. A mecenas, Hugo reportedly stole Warhol's work and Elsa Peretti. Hugo reportedly stole Warhol's work and Elsa Peretti belonging to feed his drug habit. In 1989, Hugo has expressed dissatisfaction with how he has portrayed in the Andy Warhol's diaries, threatening to auction off any Warhol piece in possession. "I feel like the Center Park logger. I have been gang raped and beaten by a dead person and a bunch of thugs that work for him. It is the most vile, disgusting piece of pulp literature I ever read." Shortly before Halston's death in 1990s, Halston's brother Bob Halston locked Hugo out on learning that Hugo had moved back in and was stealing Halston's personal property. A contract was dropped by requiring that Hugo will not contest Halston will not cause any embarrassment to the state. Hugo had previously signed a non-disclosure agreement in 1985 to not speak publicly about the relationship with Halston in exchange for a large monetary sum, but he broke it. Hugo has, how all of this art and sex and power and money is related to. Later in life, in 1999, it was reporting to this. In September 2007, an exhibition of mannequins dressed by Hugo was held in Milky Gallery here. Gianfranco Rodriguez portrayed Hugo. In 2021, Ryan Murphy produced Netflix series miniseries Halston. To prepare for the role, Rodriguez conducted extensive research that included consulting with one of Hugo's friends. But that's interesting. Victor Hugo. Very, very interesting. A Venezuelan and window dresser. This caused tension in Warhol's relationship with Johnson, who did not approve of his friendship with Hugo. When Studio 54 opened, things changed with Andy. That was New York when it was at the height of its most decadent period, and I didn't take part. I never liked that scene. I was never comfortable. Andy was just wasting his time and was really upsetting. He just spent his time with the most ridiculous people, say Johnson. In 1979, Warhol formed a published company, Andy Warhol Books, and released the book's Exposure, which contained his photograph of famous friends and acquaintances. In November 1979, he embarked on a 3-week book tour in the U.S. Warhol devoted much of his time to rounding up new, rich patrons for portraying commissions, including Shah of Iran. Warhol devoted much of his time rounding up new, rich patrons for portraying commissions, including Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. his white empress Farah Pahlavi. Is she alive? Holy hell. Holy hell, is she alive? Holy hell, is she alive? Yeah, damn. Holy hell. Holy hell, is she alive? Mm. Mm. Sha. Hmm. Ives Saint Laurent for Dior. Ayatollah Khomeini. Mm. Interesting. Oops. Oh my god. I took a long segue here. But in any case. Okay. But in any case, holy hell. Anyway, I mentioned all of this. I mentioned all of this and what David Bowie mentioned. Mm. And why David Bowie, what David Bowie mentioned about the internet, all right, and all of this, but is because now this internet is like the new life form, is like an alien art form. We are now exposed to all of this realities and perspective of the humans that is very interesting and deep and absorbing. So I'll be right back. And I'm back finally. A day later, here I am. So what I want to now finally dive deep in today's video is that aspect of how we organize our code, and by understanding the ins and out of the lexical scope, and how understanding and mastering the ins and outs of lexical scope, and also is the closure, and how now closures enable is a way to organize our data and its functionality. How this particular pattern, the model pattern, is so effective and has been shown so effective to organize our code in programming, right? So we can now bundle this is in one single package and reuse that across different part of our program. So there is I also was talking about the booth match methods and so on and so forth, and to I describe what David Bowie, for example, mentioned when he was interviewed by a UK reporter, but a British reporter, when they ask about is the internet and what the internet is for him. And well, I recognize something that I am experiencing, right? Which is this new alien form. In other words, it's like, because now I am exposed to all of this different content, in video, in audio, and all of this, right? And this content, it is from Europe, the Middle East, the Africa, the Southeast Asia, China, Russia, Australia, North America and South America and Central America, and also things that are happens around the world, all right, with international airspace programs and centers, so the NASA and also from the India, Japan, China. So with this exposure of this reality, all right, now you're starting to create and understand is what is true in all of this. What is the human experience, and that to me is quite revealing and interesting, this kind of exploration, rather than go out and like perhaps Elon Musk mentions, hey, let's go to Mars and do things, and then now they hit the brake, because all the problems that or the conflict that we are experiencing on the earth, which any conflict is just self-conflict. But in any case, yeah, I just want to mention that because before this video, or in the previous minutes and hour, I was talking about, I was mentioning is that the nature of the internet, and also all the things that are related, especially with David Bowie, and how now has some agents that represent him to say, hey, this is what we are going to do, right? So you're going to do your artist stuff, and we're going to handle this, the money and all that kind of stuff. And again, the TLDR of this is going back to what we really care, which is looking at how we organize our code and how the Butch method has been shown. It actually is part of a book to modeling is object-oriented language in software engineering, right? For object-oriented analysis and design. The question is that why this is useful and when this is useful. Right now I'm working for a real estate company when they want to actually pull some metrics, and those metrics are how do you call it? And those metrics are already data that they collected over the past 10 to 15 years. They curate that data, and they want us to now build a tool to highlight those kind of metrics, or this KPI, the key performance indicator, which at the end of the day is just metrics, all right, to show that to the real estate agent. So with that, he can now anytime he contacts some investors and so on and so forth, he can deliver some accurate data. Now, so all of this, because from the software perspective, which is logical and physical, static and dynamic here, right? The Bush notation is characterized by clause shapes to represent classes and distinguish the following diagrams. So you have the logical and the physical, and in the logic you have static and dynamic diagrams. Static, which is class diagrams and object diagrams, and dynamic, which is state transitions and interactions diagram. That's interesting. So this is state diagram. Basic UML is state diagram. Okay, and the same for the interactions diagram here. Some of this some of this are now being used, especially for larger companies, um, in order to describe is this. So sequence diagram and system sequence diagram. So here is now a system sequence diagram. The computer and the server and so on and so forth. So this is a novel using is the author and the system. Right, this is the sales transaction. This text state the condition of the iteration. As long as this condition is true, the iteration continues, right? For as many items as needed, this box encloses an iteration loops, all right? So scan all of these products, and then the items in parentheses are parameters, like this, and the dotted line indicates a return message here. So, for example, OAuth 2, this sequence diagram is something that is used. For example, here for authentication, let me see if I can actually show that line authentication or the diagram. Threat model and security considerations. Token and token management, high security, draft spec. Oh my god, I just want to look at the diagram. Why so hard to exactly this sequence diagrams? Oh, developer Octa. Good. 2022 Octa. Again, Octa is like a service to they provide the API and the infrastructure for authentication, enterprise authentication. So understand the basic identity for that. But again, they describing is how this works add off to any app, right? So this is the flow, and but specifically is this, right? This sequence diagrams. So you have now different entities, the sequence here, right? Show process interactions arranged in time sequence. This diagram depicts the process and objects involved and the sequence of message exchange as needed to carry out the functionality. Sequence diagrams are typically associated with use case realizations in the 401 architectural view model. Okay, view model. That's interesting. Look at this. Used for describing the architecture of software-intense system based on the use of multiple concurrent views. The views are used to describe the system from the viewpoint of different stakeholders, such as end users, developers, system engineers. Okay, we're interesting. So Grady Butch is describing this, or this model is describing this from different shareholder perspective. So the end users, the developers, the system engineers, and project managers. The four view of the model are logical, development, process, and physical view. In the addition, selected use cases or scenarios are used to illustrate the architecture serving as the +1 view. Hence, the model contains +4 +1 view. The logical view is concerned with the functionality that the system provides to the end user. The UML are used to represent the logical view, including the classes and state diagrams. Mhm. Hey, what are the functionality that the system provide to end users? The other is the process view. The process view deal with dynamic aspect of the system. Explain the system, process, and how they communicate, and focus on the runtime behavior of the system. Okay, so the logical view is what are the features that are exposed or that provide to end users. The process view is how these different services or application system communicate and focus on runtime behavior on the system. The process view address concurrency, distribution, integrator, performance, and scalability. UML diagrams to represent process view include the sequence diagram, communication diagram, and activity diagram. Development view, the development view, aka the implementation view, illustrate a system from a programmer's perspective, and it is concerned with software management. UL diagrams are used to represent the development view, including package diagram and the component diagram. Okay, package diagram. Look at this. Okay, from the developer perspective, package diagrams. Okay. The package diagram. Okay, it's like a map. Okay, so you're mapping all of this. Or this is quite similar to the tree map. So package diagram, it is the same as a tree map in Webpack, which is I'm assuming that it is. It's not the same as a tree map, though both visualize dependency structure. A package diagram, such as one generated by the Component 3 Webpack plugin, represents a hierarchical tree of model or component, typically focusing on a specific directory and file extension, and is useful to understand components relationship in applications like React and so on. But while both diagrams can derive from Webpack dependency graph, they can serve different purpose. Package diagram emphasize structure and relationship, whereas tree map emphasize size and optimizations. Okay. Okay. Again, something that goes a little bit beyond the scope of today's video. But is this. Okay, package import and merge from the developer perspective. And then you have the physical view, aka the deployment. Depicts the system from the system engineering point of view. It is concerned with the topology of the software component on the physical layer, as well as the physical connection between these components. The UML diagrams used to represent the physical view include the deployment diagram, where this will be now deploy. Okay, the deployment of components here, application servers, and so on and so forth. An execution environment, product schema, and policy schema, and workstation, which is the device, another device, and another device. All of these are devices. Okay, but each one of those devices now serve as a. Okay, each one of those devices serve as have a purpose. The product server, the document server, the database server, the directory server, the underwriting and rating server, the policy server, the presentation server, and the execution environment. To be clustered to meet throughput needs. Okay. AKA they are the artifacts. The nodes appear as boxes, and the artifact allocated to each node appears as the rectangle within the boxes. Node may have subnodes which appear as nested boxes. A single node in deployment diagram may conceptually represent multiple physical nodes, such as a cluster or a database server. And there are two types of node, the device node and the execution environment node. But this is a specified construct that can be used to define the execution architecture of system and the assignment of the software architects to system elements. To describe a website, for example, a deployment diagram will show what hardware components node exist, aka a web server, an application server, and a database. Exactly. You want to describe, okay, from the physical perspective, what software components or artifacts run on each node, web applications, the database, and how the different pieces are connected. GDB or via REST or RMI. Mm-hmm. 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 Let me hear because what I'm seeing here is the company I'm gonna work with actually is dealing with this, right? Wait, what the French says? um, This is the package deployment. And the physical one. Oh, the UML. Okay. UML2 Grady Butch. Mm-hmm.
You breathe, and so you don't even think about it. You look.
Now let me see if
This leads us to contemporary architecture.
fair use.
That I've got a shelf full of books on architecture, both in the older ones and new ones. And if you look at what a lot of people speak of as software architecture today, I think it's reasonable and sound, and there's good stuff there. But in many of the kinds of systems these architects talk about, the architectural decisions have largely been made for you. I'm going to build a system that requires message passing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go find, Rabbit MQ or whatever, or Redis or whatever I need. The architectural decisions have been made for you. So a lot of the activities of contemporary architects is simply taking very large frameworks and components and weaving them together, which is a very noble and wonderful thing to do. They also represent systems like Meta and does in particular. They have grown their architecture and system over a few decades now, and the stuff they're building on top of it is largely evolving and building upon those APIs, which does not require the deeper kinds of architectural thinking. So I use this. Let me give you an image here of a three-axis system. Along one axis, you have levels of ceremony. If I'm a startup, then it's just my other people's money and no one else's.
Fair use.
And heck, I can write disposable software, and if I fail, I'll just go find another venture capitalist. Of course, I'm not going to worry about any kinds of degree of ceremony, because just build it. Go hire some brilliant people and make it happen.
Exactly. Go hire brilliant people and make it happen. The TLDR is that, and trying to the talent acquisition is something that is here, and those talents are back in 10 or 15, 20 years ago. They're just actually now more willing to explore this. But I do think that now the talent has look at the landscape of, and again, younger generation will figure out that, but but they have looked at the past, and some of their colleagues and so on and so forth, and they say, hey, those small folks that work at different top tech companies, or they will at all of those top tech startups, right? Mainly they were motivated is by money. There is nothing good or wrong about it. It's just the way it is. But if you're building now a product, or if you are in a startup and you're trying to build a product like this, you require now a level of taste, and among other things that is less likely on the mechanical stuff, but more about is on the appealing and the psychology nature and all of it. So Valve with through Steam, when they use now CS, Counter Strike setups and CS:GO and so on and so forth, they now have to hire is brilliant people in the economy and the psychology field to say, hey, how do we now build products that are more engaging? One, and second, so more products that are more sex appeal, right? This is why I, over the past 15 months, I have devoted myself to understand is the nature of the job. So the nature of why am I building and helping these kind of companies to build their products. So what is their target? What is the true nature of this? And I realize, based on the observation, is most of this company, they are looking for profit margins. There's nothing wrong or good about it, right? And those users that are now sucking to this, at the end of the day, this product that we're building is appealing to things that we cannot resist, right? So, for example, I can summarize this on the seven sins, seven deadly sins, or seven deadly sins, okay? Because this, through how history have been with us, right? This is what the minds has been captured. So I don't see now this as some esoterical, intellectual, risk-free things. Yeah, there are things that exist. So, for example, pride, to greed, wrath. Right now, I'm perhaps suffering, not suffering. I'm just experiencing more greed in my life, greed and loss, and it's interesting. Greed and loss rather than a sloth. Don't get me wrong. I definitely uh, 15 years ago I was suffering, or I'd let myself get into the sloth. All right, not gluttony. I was never be somebody like that. Overindulgence or overconsumption. Gluttony. I was not that kind of. Despite that, I have huge. I was somebody that has. Uh, I come from a browsing cradle, right? But lost, my God, and envy. But envy over the year to me has dissipated because I want to understand what envy is by just asking the question, the quality of the question, which is, hey, do I really want to be in that position? Do I really want? Do I really want everything that that person is holding? Do I would like to swap for a year myself with that person, not for one day? No, 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 I'm not talking one day. I'm talking for a year, right? And if the answer is yes, Well, and if the answer is not, you already you already know this. So that's why when I look people that are richer than me, wealthy than me, all right, what I'm figuring out is that the truth is not in what they have. Uh, the truth is not. The truth is that only one specific thing of what they have. It might be youth. It might be yeah. There might be youth. It might be health. It might be wealth. And when I recognize all of this stuff and I integrate that into my life, of course, youth is something that well, you can fight against nature, but trying to at least feel younger by doing the thing that you need to do, if that's what you truly want, all right, because it works. So this kind of stuff is to me is like yeah, and the same for wrath. So over the years, started to understand that those things that I hate is because I didn't understand, and now this dissipate. Simple, but again, not in that intellectual, not for the intellect that is great for cocktail party, but for a sincere desire to understand that actually make a transformation. So in any case, and the other is greed, right? This is an insatiable desire for material gain or social value. More likely, I don't care about the social value. It's like, but what I do is the material gain, you know, especially because I recognize the state of affair in when you live your life by yourself. Hey, you are alone, and then that realization say, hey, there are now things that you have to do by yourself. Your 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 you from the future will thank you for doing that. And yeah, it's like it's this it is what it is, man. And that's why I know that I have to work on, or at least understand until when I have my grid, when this grid will take me, for how long. But again, I'm starting to realize and understand is this, all right? Is this desire for material stuff, especially because the older I get, the more I will need assistance. So that's why I also combine this with the youth and stuff like that. And in terms of pride, pride is a human secondary emotion characterized by a sense of security with one's identity, performance, or accomplishments. It's often considered the opposite of shame, and depending on context, may be viewed as either a virtue or a vice. Typically, pride arises from praise. And to me, it's like, no, not at all. No, because all of those accomplished or performance or identity that you have built and so on and so forth, um, they're changed. It changed. Everything changed. That's a truth. Not as an intellectualization, is something that transforms. And so yeah, right now I'm with the greed and the lust, right? It's interesting because it's lust for sexual activity, money, or power. But it can also take such mundane form as lust for food or the lust for redolence. Here. Now, this is part of the emotions. This is a realm that I and I will dive deep into it, understand this. Grief, laughing, rage, vigilance, anticipation and interest, ecstasies, joy and serenity, admiration, trust, and acceptance, and terror and fear, apprehension, amazement, surprise, distraction, and grief. Again, I don't know who made this, because this is another one. And all of this is just attempts to understand all the things that govern our mind, the things that govern our self, this identity that we create. So we have anger, anticipations, joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, and disgust. So we got disgust, and then you have now envy here, so unbelief, despair, curiosity. That's something that has, well, to me has been motivate me to do some things. Guilt, hope, pride, cynicism. And then the inner things of this is morbidness, pessimism, outrage, shame, sentimentality, delight, anxiety, and dominance. So here is this. Is the joy and anticipation is the optimism, what it unites is. Anticipation and anger is aggressiveness. The contempt, anger and disgust. The remorse, disgust and sadness. And how do you join joy and sadness? You know what I mean? With hope and unbelief. Again, all of these are attempts to understand yourself, right? Attempts to understand is yourself. This is now lust. But it can also take such mundane form as lust for food, gluttony, a distinct from a need for food, or lust for redolence, when one is lusting for a particular smell that brings back memory. Lust is similar to, but distinguished from passion. In that property, order, passion propels individual to achieve benevolent goals, while lust does not. Benevolent, it is a lot of the benevolent goals. What is benevolent? What is benevolent from which perspective? Again, this is not a video about talking the 7 deadly sins, but I do find this revealing in terms of understanding why you are doing the thing that you do, right? Religion tends to draw a distinction between passion and lust by further categorize lust as an immoral desire and passion as morally accepted. Here we go with the morality and stuff and so on and so forth. Religion tends to draw a distinction between passion and lust. Further categorizing lust as an immoral desire and passion as a morally accepted. Lust is defined as immoral because it is object or actions of affection is improperly ordered according to natural law. Here we go, bro. And or the appetite of the particular objects. The sexual desire is governed the person's will and intellect rather than the will and intellect governing the appetite for that object. Again, talking about is ideas, but not about the true of all of this, which is the mind. Whereas passions, regardless of its strength, is maintained to be something God-driven and moral. Because the purpose, actions, and intention behind we're talking about here is this. The actions and the intentions behind it are benevolent and ordered toward creations. while also being governed by the personal intellects and will. A primary school of thought of this is Thomism, which speak on the intellect, will and appetite and draw from principles defined by Aristotle. However, the exact definitions assigned to what is morally definite and ordered towards creations depend on the religion. For example, religion based in pantheism and theism will differ on what is moral according to the nature of God, acknowledge or worship. Um, Yetzer Hara is often identified with Satan as the angel of death, and there is something of the a demon scenting his lust. And in Islam, lust is considered one of the primitive state of the self, called naf. Ah, here we even all of these religions have this. Allah and Gafla, and Dunja. An Islamic model of the soul. Okay, they're models. Models. Hmm. Hmm. Characteristic of naf: pride, greed, jealous, lust, backbiting, stabbing, stinginess, malice, in Hinduism, Vishnu is an avatar of Vishnu. The Buddhism, suffering, dukkha, is inherent in all life. Suffering is caused by desires, and this is Buddhism, and there is a natural way to eliminate all suffering from one's life. The ending of desire eliminates all suffering from someone's life. Again, all of these are recipes, right? Brahma Kumaris. According to Brahma Kumaris, a spiritual organization which is based on karmic philosophy, sexual lust is the greatest enemy to all mankind. For this reason, followers do not eat onions, garlic, eggs, or non-vegetarian food, as the sulfur in them can excite sexual lust in the body, otherwise bound to celibate. Okay, man. Goya's man mocked by two women. The more a man cultivates the arts, the less randy he becomes. Only the brute is good at coupling, and coupling is lyricism of the masses. And copulation is a lyricism of the masses. To copulate is to enter into another, and the artist never emerged from himself. What the hell is even this? Belauder. Oh no, here we go. No. Here we go with all of these recipes and people from author of Les Fleurs du Mal had once remarked in regard to the artist that the more a man cultivates the arts, the less randy he becomes. What the French toast is randy? What the French toast is Randy. Not Joey Randy, like no, that's a good one. Reggaeton couple Randy meaning desirous of sexual activity, sexual arousal. Scott ill manners, having a coarse manners. Randy, Randy. Where do you pull this? Desires of sexual activity, sexual arousal, ill manner. Mm-hmm. 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 Randy. The less sexual desire he becomes. Only the brute is good at coupling. This kind of a statement is, but okay. And copulation is the citizen of the masses. Now this resonates with me. It's like there is truth with this. To copulate is to enter into another, and the artist never emerged from himself. And when you talk about the artist, you're talking what is the artist's word mean, bro? Because what is the etymology of this? Artist, one who cultivates one of the fine arts. From Italia, artista, from medieval Latin, artista. Originally, especially of the art preside over by the muse. Mm-hmm. Originally, especially of the art presides over by the muses. History, poetry, comedy, tragedy, music, dancing, and astronomy, but also used in 17th century for one skill in any art of craft, including professions, surgeon, craftsmen, cooks. Since mid 18th century, especially of one who practiced the art of design or visual arts. And then you have now the word the act art. Early third, according to etymology line, skill as a result of learning. Okay. Skill as a result of learning or practice. From Old French and directly from Latin artem, nominated arts, work of art, practical skill, a business craft. From pi, the manner mode, the Greek artisein, to prepare. Interesting. From source also from Sanskrit, rit, manner, and mode. In Greek, artisan, to prepare. Suffix from the root art, to fit together. Etymologically, it is akin to Latin arma, weapon. So it is a weapon. It is a mode. It is a way to prepare to become a weapon. In the Middle English, usually with a sense of a skill in scholarship and learning, especially in the seven signs of liberal arts. What is this liberal arts? This sense remains in Bachelor of Arts, etc. The meaning human worship as opposed to nature is from the late 14th century. The meaning system of rule of tradition for performing certain actions is from the late 15th, and the sense of skill is cunning and trickery. It is attested by the late 16th century, the sense in artful, artless. Mm-hmm. Um, Mm. Mm. Skill in creative art. In science, you must not talk before you know. In science, you must not talk before you know. In art, you must not talk before you do. In literature, you must not talk before you think. In science, you must not talk before you know. In art, you must not talk before you do. And in literature, you must not talk before you think. It's an action here before you know or do and think. For art comes to you promising frankly to give nothing but the highest quality to your moment as they pass, and simple for those moments. So, but in any case, this word or artist is somebody that's cultivating is this the liberal arts. The name of the seven attains directly to intellectual enlargement rather than immediately practical purpose. The name of the seven attainments directed to intellectual enlargement rather than immediate practical purpose, and thus deemed worthy of a free man. Liberal in this sense is opposed to servile or mechanical. They were divided into the tribune, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. See trivial. And the quadrivium. Trivium. Okay. See trivial. Insignificant. They were divided into tribune, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. They were seen as a trivial, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Explained by Fowler as the education designed for a gentleman, Latin fiber a free man, and opposed on the one hand to technical or professional and any special training, and on the other the education that stops short before manhood is reached. On the one hand, technical and professional or any special training, and on the other, to education that stops short before manhood is reached. The study of the classic is fitly called a liberal education because it emancipates the mind from every narrow provincialism. Ah, damn, son. I said that because it is again the mind, and it is ego, and it is ideas and values and all that kind of stuff. But the mind is created by the environment. Whether of egoism or tradition, talking about egoism or tradition, and is the apprenticeship that everyone must serve before becoming a free brother of the guild, which pass the torch of life from age to age. James Russell Lowell, who the French does he? American poet, critic, editor, and diplomat. Diplomat? Oh, that's interesting. Was an American poet, critic, essayist, editor, and diplomat whose major significance probably lies in the interest in literature he helped develop in the United States. He was a highly influential man of letter in his day, but his reputation declined in the 20th century. A member of distinguished New England family, Lowell graduated from Harvard in 1838 and in 1840 took his degree in law. Through his academic career has been lackluster and he did not care to practice law for a profession. In 1844, he was married to the gifted poet Maria White, who has inspired his poem in a year's life, 1841, and who have helped him channel his energy into fruitful directions. In 1845, Lowell published Conversation of Some of the Old Poets, a collection of critical essays that include pleas for the abolition of slavery. From 1845 and 50, he wrote about the 50 anti-slavery articles for periodicals. Even more effective in this regard were his Big Law papers, which he began to serialize June 17, 1846, and the first series in which we collected in book form in 1848. In this satirical verse, Lowell uses humorous and original New England dialect, New England dialect, to express his opposition to the Mexican War as an attempt to extend the area of slavery. The year 1848 also saw the publication of Lowell's two other most important pieces of writing: The Vision of Sir Launfal, an enormously popular long poem extolling the brotherhood of man, and The Fable for Critics, a witty and ruckling verse evaluation of contemporary American authors. These books, together with the publication that year of the second series of his poems, made Lowell the most popular new figure in American literature. The death of the three of Lowell's children was followed by the death of his wife in 1853. Henceforth, his literary production comprised mainly prose essays on topics of literature, history, and politics. In 1855, his lecture in English poet before the Lowell Institute led to his appointment and Smith Professor of Modern Language at Harvard, succeeding Henry Hansworth Longfellow. After a year-long visit to Italy in Germany in 1855 and 56 to study, he held this professorship for the next 20 years. In 1857, he married France Dulap, who had cared for his only remaining child, Mabel, and in that year he began his 4 years edition of the New Atlantic Monthly, to which he had attracted the major New England author. Lowell wrote a second series of Big Law papers for the Atlantic Monthly that were devoted to unionism and that were collected in book form in 1867. After the American Civil War, he expressed his devotions to the Union, caused in four memorial odes, the best of which is ode recited. But again, it is you transcendentalism. What the hell? Transcendentalism, 18th century movement of writer and philosopher in New England, who were loosely bound together by adhering to an idealistic system of thought based on a belief in the essential unity of all creations, the innate goodness of humanity, and the supremacy of insights over logic. Oh. I will say now true instead of, but it's true. It's true. This is just true. And the experience for the revelation of the deepest truth. An experience for the revelation of the deepest truth. Right? Yeah, it's like, okay. Why I'm not surprised looking at Ludwig Wittgenstein. Yeah, man. Tarski and trust conditions. Deflations. Anyway, okay, I get into this. Life in the woods. Holy shit. transcendentalism. German transcendentalism, especially, it was refracted as Samuel Taylor Coler in this. Platonism and Neoplatonism, the Indian and Chinese scriptures, and the writing of such mystics as Emmanuel Swedenborg and Jacob Boehme were source of which the New England transcendentalists turned in their search for a liberating philosophy. Okay. Okay. Woman suffragette, better condition for workers, temperance for all, and modification of the dress and diet. The rise of free religions, education, innovation, and other humanitarian causes. I'm excelling here. I'm exhaling. Exactly. I'm exhaling because all of these are ideas. And again, there sounds great for cocktail party. Yeah, there sounds great for cocktail parties, but they don't generate any transformation. And the true generate transformation. So again, the liberal arts is this: trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Liberal, generous, also nobly born, noble free, selfless, magnanimous, admirable. From early 15th century, in a bad sense, extravagant, unrestrained. From old French liberal, befitting free people, noble, generous, willing, zealous. 12th century, a directly from Latin liberal, is noble, gracious, munificent, generous, literally of freedom, pertaining to or befitting a free person. From liberal, free, unrestricted, impediment, unbridled, unchecked, licentious. This is the conjecture to be from vibe, which probably originally meant belonging to the people. Again. Going back to here, okay. I want to know is about liberal arts, okay. And there is a confusion here about what an artist is, and they don't describe this, and I think they don't describe this in a ways that when you read or experience something, when that generate a feeling, is because there is a truth in that, whatever feeling it is, hate, lust, true, joy, happiness, sadness, rage, anger, disgusting, there is a truth in there. And this doesn't generate any feeling here, because it's like, because what I see here is that the language in itself is not able to convey to that. Oh my god. Okay. But what I can say is that is on the exploration or on the cultivation or in the devotion of this thing called muses, right? Or inspirations. Or inspirations, bro. Or inspirations, bro. Apollo and the Muses on Mount Parnassus. What the hell is even this? Apollo and the Muses of Mount Parnassus. What the hell is this? Why they have their... Yeah, but there was something. There was... Yeah, but what the French does? Apollo and the Muses of Mount Parnassus. Yale. Apollo and the Muses of Mount Parnassus. Why here they don't have that? they chop off that in National Gallery Art. Well, anyway, anyway, but it's inspiration, man. It is inspiration. It is inspiration, man. Okay, 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 okay. Terpíscore, Eratos, Clio, Thalia, Polyhymna, Sacred Poetry, Calliope, Eloquence and Epic Poetry, Apollo and the Muses. Exactly, it's like the famous of all of this. Eutepir. Okay, 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 okay. I started to see the relationship here of something that our ancestors back in Greece, right? They say, we don't know what is this, but what we know is that exists. Okay, what the fuck was that? We don't know. We don't know what is this, but what I know is that exists. Okay, in terms of describing, this is the true exploration. This is the true explanation. Why is this? Oh, okay. Okay. Holy fuck. True exploration. Hmm. Hmm. When describing is the attitude, is the is this when I'm describing is this yeah when I'm describing this intention. It's the inspiration, exactly. Go in peace. But what I do know is that it exists. How do I know it? Because I can feel it inside of my body, on the top of my head. Hmm. Hmm. To breathe in. Psychiatrist Carl Jung theory of inspiration suggests that an artist is one who has attuned to their creative instincts, which encode the archetype of the human mind. The Marxist theory of art see as the expression of the friction between economic base and the economic superstructural position, or as an unaware dialogue of competing that or as an unaware dialogue of competing ideology. As an entirely internal process, man. In the book, and we're trying to project some image to try to evoke that, but yeah, that's right. We're trying to project this image as a way to evoke that. Hmm. The word inspiration. Immediate influence or of God or God or a God. Inhaling, breathe in inspiration. Hmm. Hmm. Like the animating or vital principles in man and animals. But it's relevant to God. Exactly. It's immediate influence of God. And what the friend God is this? Is this supreme being. Proto-Germanic, Gutan. Source also of Old Saxon, Old Frisian, Dutch God, Old High German, German Goth, and Old Norse, Gothic Gup. which is of uncertain origins, perhaps from p, good, that which is in vogue, and also Old Church Slavonic sovo, to call, Sanskrit ahuta, invoke, an epithet of Indra, from root, to call, invoke. Hey. Okay. 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 Good. Good. Yes. Mm. Oh, okay. Google. Oh my god! When I put Google, it's like, oh shit, that's. Anyway. Anyway. Oh my god! This is like. Hmm. But it's to pour something. It's a supreme being. Exactly. And what a supreme mean, you know? What is it? What the supreme mean? It is full, highest, something literal, but essentially highest in authority, holding the highest place in power. It all boils down to this, man. To power, bro. To control, to act or do. Especially in battle, efficacy, control, mastery, lordship, dominion, ability, right to command or control, legal power or authority, authorization, military force, and army. Colloquial, a power of for a large quantity. But it's them, and this influence, this ability to act and do. Hmm. Okay. Full of things, bro. Full of ideas and the supremes and all sort of yada yada. Is like, all right. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So all of this is just to summarize is one specific topic that happens, and that has been recurring in my life. This lack of power that I feel in over my life. And then when I recognize this lack of control, this lack of dominance in an area, which especially is on the money, uh, to do so. So then I decide, well, I know what I have to do. So, all right. That was quite revealing, right? That was quite revealing. Absolutely. Hmm. But this is a sequence diagram that describe what happened in time. Hmm. And there is a package diagram and the deployment diagram. Hmm. System and software engineer. Architecture description is an international standard of architecture. Mm. 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 Hmm. 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 Unfathomable. Unfathomable. Who in the French toast used that word, bro? Well, yeah. Inconmensurable, amigo. Anatomy of an ISO. Architectural descriptions, stakeholders and concerns, viewpoints and views, model kind, architecture frameworks, and this. Well, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.